The night after the memorial is quiet, and the way a closed book is quiet. I sit in the little reading room, the one with the old floor lamp and the window that looks toward the cottonwoods. There is an envelope on the table. It came with no apology, only a courier's nod. Inside, a cashier's check for $10,000 and a single page someone calls a valuation. One page. No schedules, no footnotes, just a number typed in a wide, careless font, as if the years could be pushed into a margin and forgotten there. I lay the one page down beside the check and breathe. 45 years is not a number. 45 years is late dinners left in the warming drawer. It is the smell of cutting oil in my husband's coat. It is the names of men and women who sent their kids to college on honest wages and who text me when a bearing line squeaks. $10,000 is an insult with a signature. My phone buzzes. A message from my son, short and neat, like every sentence he's spoken to me since the funeral. Mom, you need to vacate the house by the 30th. We'll handle the rest. I let the words expand in the room like cold air. I set the phone down, face up, so the timestamp faces me. There is a bookmark in the old living trust, yellow and frayed. I open to the clause that covers the house. There, in my husband's careful language, is the promise that I may remain here. That clause is not sentimental. It is a wall built of our mornings and our careful planning. I run my finger down the paragraph and feel a steadiness return, a small quiet warmth that does not ask permission. There is a flash drive on my desk. It is matted silver and has Q4IP etched in tiny letters. Marcus left it for me, saying there were logs I should see. Activity that looked like someone trying to move what isn't theirs to move. I don't plug it in yet. I simply set the drive between the one page and the check, a little altar to the story they are trying to tell me and the story I know to be true. I call Dana Mercer. She answers on the second ring, her voice soft with that mix of fatigue and readiness that good attorneys carry. I say only the essentials. A check, a one page, a text telling me to leave my house. An early board meeting I was not told about until today. There's a silence where the shape of her nods through the line. We make a plan to speak again before dawn, and I send her a picture of the one page, the check, the page in the trust, and the text with its hard 30. If you ever find yourself facing a document that shrinks your years into a single number, do not rush to sign or to argue. Make copies. Write down times. Photograph the envelope, the check, the text. Open your will or trust and reread the clauses, that name where you will sleep and who will vote when the ordinary custodians are gone. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. The lamp clicks off. The reading room holds its breath. I open a small notebook with blue squares and title a new page, Event Log. At 8:42 p.m., I write, Courier-delivered envelope containing cashier's check for $10,000 and one-page valuation. At 8:51 p.m., text from Aaron, vacate by the 30th. At 9:03 p.m., reviewed trust clause, re-residence. At 9:17 p.m., call with Dana. Plan, hold, gather, observe. Morning arrives in the simple way morning always does, with coffee and the sound of trucks on the county road. Marcus meets me in the lot behind the machine shop before first shift. His hands smell of hand cleaner and honest labor. He pulls a tablet from his backpack and shows me a timeline. At 2:13 a.m., an attempted transfer from our internal server, a package labeled with engineering drawings and test data. At 2:17 a.m., a firewall alert. At 2:21 a.m., a write attempt to a private cloud folder tied to a new corporate entity. He shows me the name Monarch Holdings, LLC. It is a clean name for something that does not feel clean. Who holds Monarch? I ask. He shrugs. The administrator email is generic. The physical address is a shared office in a city that has never smelled our oil or our winter. Marcus touches the silver drive in my hand. I cloned the logs, he says. I put the originals back where they were. This copy has all the timestamps, signatures, attempted passwords. I do not talk about betrayal. I ask him about the pension fund. He pulls out a second folder, a stack of paper with grids and small numbers. We're 2 quarters behind on remitting the contributions, he says. Money was moved from the payroll sweep into a holding account that doesn't match our normal path. Ruth noticed because 2 retirees called about late statements. Ruth is our union voice when the coffee is strong and the Friday shift is long. I text her. She answers with a photo from her office, a list of names in a red circle around the words late credit. She writes, "We'll sit tight. Do what you need. The floor is with you." I drive to the bank and ask for Jacob West. He is a careful man who chooses his ties the way machinists choose tolerances. He prints a page and slides it to me. A request came yesterday to change signing authority and to lift the transaction limit for a new vendor, Monarch again. It didn't smell right, he says, but the paperwork had a board letterhead. I look at the date and the time, and I write both in my event log. I ask him to accept a formal letter from me by noon, a request to pause any transfers of intellectual property or pension funds pending review. He nods. He knows our town. He knows that quiet is not the same as surrender. At noon, a new email pings, and with it a photo from our mailroom, a printed notice for a board meeting 48 hours earlier than our usual cadence. The ink is smudged in one corner, as if the machine rushed the page. The location is a conference room we rarely use, smaller, easier to control. I print it and circle the early time with a red pen. I lay it beside the 1-page valuation and the check, and I place the silver drive aligned with the edges. Rows on a table are a kind of spine when you need one. If you are caught in a sudden acceleration, a meeting moved up, a decision pushed through, slow yourself down intentionally. Create an event log. Name every time. Ask for official copies. Notify the bank in writing to pause transfers if you suspect something is wrong. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. That night I open the living trust again and read the clause about voting rights when a spouse passes. It is written in the small, cautious voice of a man who sold his first lathe to buy a better one and never borrowed more than our hands could carry. The clause gives me temporary authority when malice or confusion threatens the stability of the company. Temporary is enough. The house is quiet, but it is not empty. I write a letter to the board secretary and a copy to the bank. I attach a list of documents, the 1-page valuation, the cashier's check, the text message ordering me to leave my home, the board notice with its careful haste, and the log of attempted transfers from our servers. I do not argue in the letter. I do not accuse. I state facts and ask that all transfers of intellectual property and pension contributions be suspended pending review by the full board. I sign with my full name as it appears in the trust. I place the letter in a manila envelope and on a separate sheet write, "To be delivered upon arrival, timestamp receipt." The words are small shields, but shields nonetheless. I put the envelope with the others, square them to the table's edge, and set the silver drive atop them like a paperweight with a pulse. When morning comes, I go first to the bank. Jacob reads the letter with concentration, signs a stamped receipt, and hands me a copy. I place that receipt in the event log with a new entry. 9:06 a.m. Bank accepted letter to pause transfers. Receipt attached. Then I drive to the plant, to the office where the board secretary sits. She looks at the envelope and looks at me. She reaches for stamp. The sound is satisfying in a way I did not expect, like a door bolt sliding into place. I do not meet my son that day. I meet a man whose eyes look like my son's, and who has learned to believe that speed is the same thing as intelligence. He calls to ask why I'm making things difficult. I tell him I am removing obstacles from the road by naming them for what they are. He says, "Just sign, Mom." I tell him that the trust disagrees and that I will be at the board meeting early. There is a low exhale through the receiver before the line goes dead. The next hours are made of small tasks. I scan the check and the one-page valuation. I print the trust clause and mark the relevant paragraph with a yellow tab, the old kind that curls slightly at the corners. I place the board notice with the smudged ink in a clear sleeve. I label the flash drive QVAR-IP in my own handwriting, even though the engraving is there, because when you make a record, you respect what is obvious and what is subtle. I copy the pension statements Ruth sent. I number the pages. I check the time. I write the time down. If you are close to a meeting that might undo what your life has built, prepare without drama. Count documents. Label them. Make a primary set and a backup set that never leaves your sight. Bring your identification, any power of attorney or trust clauses that apply, and a short written statement that begins and ends with facts. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. At home, I pour water for the ficus that has outgrown 3 pots and 2 corners. I put on my husband's watch. It is an old analog face that runs a few seconds slow. I have never fixed it. The small drag comforts me. It reminds me to breathe between seconds. On the morning of the meeting, I arrive early enough to hear the building warm itself up. The smaller conference room sits at the end of a hall, lined with framed photographs of apprentice classes. I know most of the names. I run my palm along the lowest frame and think of how my husband shook hands with every graduate, whether they were headed for the toolroom or the office. The door is unlocked. I choose a chair near the center of the table, not at the head, not at the end. I arrange the objects near my elbow. The cashier's check, the one-page valuation, the trust page with its yellow tab, the board notice with the smudge, the pension statements with the red circles Ruth drew, the stamped bank receipt, and the silver flash drive marked QRIP. I do not stack them. I let them breathe as if each had its own voice, because they do. One by one, people arrive with small breezes of cologne and coffee. The board secretary looks relieved that I am early. Jacob from the bank is here, calm as a ledger. Marcus sits 2 seats down, quiet, hands folded, his knuckles showing white, his jaw working the way it does when he's concentrating. Ruth arrives with her canvas tote and that glance of solidarity that tells a woman she is not the only witness in the room. My son walks in last with a man who introduces himself as counsel for Monarch Holdings. The man smiles in a way that seeks to agree with the air. He sets down a folder stamped with a generic seal. He surveys the table, its documents, its order, as if he has walked into a kitchen where someone has already measured all the ingredients. "Mrs. Carter," he says, "we're prepared to finalize." I answer in a voice that feels like it has been waiting since the first time I counted bolts at the end of a second shift. "Before anything is finalized," I say, "we have facts to acknowledge." I slide the bank receipt forward, then the board notice with the wrong time and the right smudge, and then the trust clause with its clean, faithful language. The room makes a new sound, the kind that happens when a turbine reaches its correct speed and cannot be hurried further. The man from Monarch glances at my son. He begins to speak of efficiencies and market realities and the value of consolidating ownership. I let him finish. I ask him to spell the name of the entity where our drawings were headed at 2:13 a.m. He blinks. I plug the silver drive into the laptop the secretary keeps for minutes. The log opens in a plain window. Timestamps, IP addresses, destination names. Marcus leans forward and explains each line in the same voice he used to train kids in the summer program. No blame, no heat, just lines, just the way things happened. In the corner of the table, the cashier's check lies where I first set it. It looks smaller now than it did in the lamplight. The one-page valuation looks lonely. The board secretary picks up a pen and starts to take longhand notes. Jacob adjusts his tie, not to tighten it, but to breathe. Ruth pulls from her tote the list of late pension credits and sets it beside the log. Our table is crowded now with the lives of our people. The room changes shape. My son speaks, finally, and what he says is not a defense so much as a habit. He talks about moving quickly before opportunity disappears. He says consolidation is standard. He says, "Mom, this is how it's done now." I look at him and I see the boy who used to sort washers by size and put the extras in his pocket. I keep my voice steady. If this is how it's done now, I say, then we are going to do it with the right clock and the right witnesses. The man from Monarch asks for a recess. He wants a separate room. He wants to leaf through papers without the smell of our floor in his nose. He wants to make this a negotiation. I let the silence stand until it is its own kind of answer. We can recess for 10 minutes, I say, for anyone to read what they haven't yet read. But nothing leaves this table, and nothing moves from any account until this board has reviewed and voted. He sits back. He watches me. Somewhere, a machine spins up. The rhythm is familiar. It is the rhythm a shop makes when it knows work is being done the right way. Those 10 minutes are enough for fingerprints to settle into the edges of every page. They are enough for my son to walk to the window and stare at the place where he learned to ride a bike. They are enough for Jacob to reread the letter he stamped and nod to himself. They are enough for Marcus to show Ruth the step in the log where the password was almost, but not quite, guessed. They are enough for me to rest my hand on the trust page, not as a claim to power, but as recognition that a promise kept gently is still a promise. When the 10 minutes close, I do not raise my voice. I say, before we proceed, I am asserting the temporary voting authority granted in the trust to suspend any transfer of intellectual property and to require immediate remediation of pension contributions in arrears. The words are simple and they are heavy. They land like tools placed in order, each in its drawer. The secretary records the motion. Across from me, my son folds his hands. He is not a villain. He is a man who forgot that bridges are harder to build than exits. He looks at the log, then at the check, then at me, and he says nothing. Yet. That is all right. Quiet is not the same as defeat. Quiet is a space where truth can return to the center of the table and stay there long enough to be seen. The 10 minutes end with no banging gavel, just the slight closing sound of a folder, and the familiar quiet of people who understand what comes next has to be real. I keep my hands open on the table. The secretary looks to me first, and I nod once. She asks if there is a second to record the motion as stated. Jacob clears his throat. Second, he says, the word precise as a decimal. We proceed without spectacle. Marcus walks the room through the transfer log, line by line. He explains the difference between a credentialed export and an unauthorized attempt dressed up to look official. He reads the timestamps and correlates them with the firewall alert, with the route to the private cloud, with the vendor name that came printed on Jacob's page. No one interrupts. The log is its own witness. Ruth places the pension statements beside the log and points to 2 columns, expected and received. She does not accuse. She notes variants, dates, and the calls she took from men who put their backs under our beams for decades. They want to know if the future they counted on is still a future, she says. Her tote bag leans against her chair like the steady shoulder of a long day. Across the table, the man from Monarch offers the language of efficiencies again, this time trimmed of its swagger. He says the market favors consolidation. He says the sooner we finalize, the more favorable the terms for legacy stakeholders. His smile lands short of his eyes. He doesn't name the late-night transfer. He doesn't have to. The log has already named it. My son sits straighter than he needs to. He keeps his hands flat, as if to prevent them from reaching for anything that might reveal too much. He glances at the check on the table and then away, as if the paper has become impolite. He looks like a man who wants to believe there is a shortcut that does not leave a scar. The floor recognizes the motion, the secretary says, and the room breathes in as one. We vote on immediate suspension of any transfers of intellectual property. We vote to restore pension contributions in arrears within the week, with a plan to remediate interest due. We vote to engage an independent auditor, not the one whose logo appears on too many brochures in the Monarch folder, but a firm with no season tickets to anyone's box. We vote to set the next regular meeting at the proper day and hour. The paper moves, the pen's write, the minutes grow a spine. If you ever find yourself in a room where facts are being asked to take a seat behind, hurry, ask for a vote on the small pillars that hold the room up. Pause transfers, restore obligations, appoint an independent review. Fix the schedule back to normal so nothing else accidentally accelerates. Keep motions narrow and verifiable. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. The man from Monarch asks to be heard. He says the delays will dampen value. He says that market windows are not sentimental. I nod. Then I tell him the window we are concerned with is the window of trust, the view a town has into a company that has paid mortgages and put braces on children's teeth. You don't own that window, I say. We do. We are not rude. We are not loud. We are exact. The secretary reads back the motions, the seconds, and the results. The bank receipt sits between us like a small square moon. The one-page valuation lies where it lies, thinner now than any page that ever mattered in our shop. The check is a ghost in its own envelope. When the votes are done, I ask for one more item of business. I speak of the promise my husband made when he bought the second lathe and hired the third apprentice, that the company will be large enough to feed a town and small enough to remember its names. I propose we study an employee stock ownership plan, phased, responsible, audited, to bring ownership into the hands that sign for deliveries and lock up after third shift. The room listens like rooms do when they sense a shape that fits what they already knew in their bones. We don't vote to adopt it. We vote to explore it seriously, to bring in a neutral advisor, to run the numbers where they can be read by anyone whose future they describe. If you want to move a company toward shared stewardship, begin with a study resolution, clear scope, neutral advisor, timeline, and town hall briefings. Insist on independent math. Keep the shop floor in the loop. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. We adjourn in a quiet that is not relief so much as alignment. The secretary prints the draft minutes. We each initial the margin by the motion to suspend transfers. Marcus unplugs the silver drive and places it back in my palm. Its weight is modest and sufficient. Ruth squeezes my shoulder, then leaves to make the announcement to the afternoon shift that nothing is changing, except that some things are finally safe again. My son lingers. The man from Monarch peels away with his folder and a polite nod that carries no destination. My son watches the corridor where the man disappears. He does not follow. He looks at the photos of apprentices lining the hall, at the kid he once was, grinning with a paper cap and a wrench too big for his hand. Walk with me, I say. We move through the building the way you only move when it is part of your biography. We stop at the window that faces the lot where he fell learning to ride and scraped his knee on the gravel. He was brave then. He can be brave now. I know you thought speed would spare us pain, I say. But speed takes shortcuts through other people's promises. This place is built on slower clocks. He nods once, then again. A storm of retorts passes across his face and dissolves. He looks at the envelope on the table behind us and whispers, I made it small to make it easy. I rest my hand on the glass. But small made it wrong, I say. In the cafeteria, where the walls still smell faintly of soup, I pour 2 coffees. The ritual steadies the scene. I tell him there is work that needs doing if he wants to stay. Not at the table where minutes are typed, but on the floor where the torque wrenches live and the tolerances are learned 1 dial turn at a time. I say there will be limits, a spending cap, oversight that is real, an evaluation after 6 months not of ideas but of follow-through. I tell him he will be supervised by a foreman who does not care whose name is on the mailbox. His chin lifts, pride's small ghost in the room. Then his shoulders drop and something like relief takes its place. Okay, he says. 1 word that is not surrender. 1 word that is the beginning of an apprenticeship he missed the first time. We walk past Ruth's office. She waves him in without ceremony. Orientation, she says, and hands him a schedule that looks exactly like every other schedule in the plant. Equality is a full-length mirror. He takes it and does not argue with his reflection. That evening, when the sun slides along the rows of cottonwoods and makes the metal of the shop glow the way late day only can, I drive home. The house meets me the way a long marriage meets you, with the stubborn patience of walls that have heard your whole story. I set my keys on the dish by the door. I place the trust back on the shelf in its usual spot, the yellow tab peeking out like a small flag planted in ordinary ground. I slide the flash drive into a sealed envelope and label it with the date and the word log. I put the bank receipt behind the trust, not hidden, just nested like a tool in the drawer where it belongs. If you have navigated a day like this, remember to build your archive while the ink is fresh. Label drives, backup minutes, file receipts with cross-references. Make a clean packet for whoever must read the story if you're not there to tell it. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. There is a photograph on the mantel of my husband shaking hands with an apprentice on the day he became a journeyman. I dust the frame with the sleeve of my sweater and carry it to the plant the next morning. In the small room we call the hall, where the names of those who stayed and did the work are pinned in quiet columns, I hang the photo. I do not make a speech. I stand with Ruth and Marcus and Jacob and the secretary and the foreman who will be my son's teacher, and we just let the picture take its place among the others. A ritual can be as simple as returning a face to a wall that knows it. A week later, the independent auditor stands in our conference room with a box of folders and a printer that takes its time. He asks for a table near an outlet and a quiet chair. He smiles the honest smile of someone who reserves his opinions for the section labeled Findings. We give him a temporary badge and a map to the coffee. He will be here as long as it takes. No one rushes him. The shop hums around the truth he will document. Ruth posts a schedule of pension restoration dates on the bulletin board by the time clock. People stop to read it on their way in and on their way out. They nod at each other with the sort of nod that buys groceries. Jacob calls to say the bank has established the controls we requested. Dual authorization for any wire above a modest threshold, alerts to 2 addresses, and a cooling-off timer for new vendors. His voice has the simple contentment of a ledger that balances by choice, not by accident. I thank him and write the time down in the event log. I keep writing it down day after day, not out of paranoia, but out of respect for the story we will need to tell ourselves if the wind ever blows this way again. My son comes home with a grease smudge on his cheek and a look of fatigued wonder in his eyes. "I forgot how good it feels to be tired for a reason," he says. And for the first time in a long time, I laugh without caution. He sits at the kitchen table and shows me a small part he machined today that passed inspection the first time. He places it on the table the way I once placed a lock of his hair after his first haircut into a small envelope and wrote the date on it. We are both learning how to keep the right things. On Sunday, we invite 3 retirees to dinner. They bring photographs from the year the second lathe arrived and stories about the day the power went out and everyone finished the order anyway by hand. After dessert, I take the cashier's check from the drawer and lay it on the table. No one touches it. We look at it the way you look at a relic from a version of history that let harm wear a neutral face. I slide it back into the envelope and mark it, voided by life. I will take it to the bank in the morning and let them handle the mechanical steps. For tonight, it is enough to let it be small and fully understood. We are not a myth. We are exactly what happens when ordinary people use ordinary tools with extraordinary care. A trust clause, a bank receipt, a 1-page valuation faced by a 1-page refusal to be minimized, a flash drive with timestamps that speak in the plain grammar of time, a union list that names the gap between promise and delivery and insists the gap be closed. The work is tedious in the best sense of the word, steady, accountable, quietly repairing what someone thought could be lifted and carried away. If you are somewhere on the path between harm attempted and order restored, consider closing your day with a gesture that reminds you who you are. Hang a photograph. Return a watch to a drawer. Write the date on an envelope and file it where you can find it when you need to remember. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. I go to bed without checking my phone. The house holds me the way a well-made tool fits the hand that knows it. In the morning, I will meet with the advisor about the ESOP study. We will ask hard questions and let the math speak. We will hold a town hall in the cafeteria where news is best received with coffee and a straight back. We will not promise what we cannot keep. We will keep what we promise. And when the workday begins and the doors open and the apprentices pour into the shop with their faces still young enough to show their futures, the machines will start their gentle music and the town will know, maybe not in words, but in paychecks and repaired trucks and a new story told at a diner, that quiet justice is not a miracle. It is a set of hands doing the right thing long enough for the right thing to stick. Comment CTA. Have you ever been pressured to just sign and move on in a family or business matter? What quiet steps helped you stand your ground?